10th, 2017, San Fernando, Tamaulipas, Mexico. 57-year-old Miriam Rodríguez hobbled toward her front door on crutches. She had broken her foot weeks earlier while chasing one of her targets. It was Mother's Day, and the afternoon felt deceptively calm in the dusty border town. A white pickup truck suddenly pulled up beside her. Armed men jumped out. Gunfire erupted without warning. Miriam was struck multiple times and collapsed in her driveway, her hand still inside her purse, where she kept her pistol. Neighbors rushed to the scene, but the truck had already vanished down the street. This was no random act of cartel violence. For more than 3 years, Miriam had done something almost no one else dared, working completely alone. She had hunted members of the ruthless Los Zetas cartel. She tracked them across towns and states. She gathered names, locations, and evidence, and she handed every piece to the authorities who could not or would not act on their own. Now, the cartel had come for her. But how did an ordinary mother from San Fernando turn herself into the one person who terrified hardened killers? It all began 3 years earlier, on the day her world was torn apart. Back in January 2014, everything changed in a single afternoon in San Fernando, Tamaulipas. 20-year-old Karen Alejandra Salinas Rodriguez was driving through the dusty streets when 2 pickup trucks boxed her in. Armed men from the Los Zetas cartel forced their way into her car and sped off. Within hours, the family received the first ransom call. The demand was clear: pay or never see her again. Miriam Rodríguez and her husband Luis scraped together every peso they could. They took out a bank loan specifically offered for ransom payments. They wired the money exactly as instructed. Days passed with no word, then weeks. The cartel never released Karen. Local police took the report but did nothing. No raids, no follow-up, no arrests.
I have nothing to
Miriam
say.
sat across from the officers day after day, pressing them for updates that never came. She watched them shrug and file the case away like hundreds of others. That silence lit something inside her. By late February, Miriam stopped waiting. She began making her own phone calls. She visited the last place Karen had been seen. She wrote down every detail the family remembered from the ransom calls. She started keeping a notebook, listing names she overheard, and license plate fragments mentioned in passing. Authorities called her obsessive. Some even warned her to let it go. Miriam ignored them. She kept knocking on doors. She kept asking questions no one else would ask. Then, in early March, she learned the worst. Karen's body had been found in a clandestine grave outside town. The cartel had killed her anyway. The news hit Miriam like a physical blow, but she did not break. She did not cry in public. Instead, she closed her notebook, stood up, and made a quiet decision right there in her kitchen. No more waiting for the system that had already failed her daughter. She would find every single person who took Karen. She would gather the proof herself, and she would hand it to the authorities whether they wanted it or not. Little did the cartel know. One ordinary mother had just declared her own war. In the weeks after that decision in her kitchen, Miriam Rodríguez began to change everything about the way she looked and moved. She dyed her hair a vivid shade of red that no one in San Fernando had ever seen on her before. She swapped her plain blouses for brighter tops and loose jackets that hid her figure. She practiced walking with a slight stoop and a friendly smile that never quite reached her eyes. By April 2014, she was no longer the grieving mother everyone recognized. She was someone else entirely. Miriam had pulled one name from the ransom calls: a low-level Zeta, known only as Sama. She found his family's address through quiet conversations with neighbors who still feared to speak openly. One morning, she put on a fake health ministry vest she had bought at a second-hand market and carried a clipboard loaded with invented survey questions. She knocked on the door and introduced herself as a government worker checking on local families. The woman who answered let her in. Over sweet coffee and small talk, Miriam asked about household members, birthdays, and daily routines. She wrote down every detail while her heart pounded. When the conversation turned to the absent son, Miriam learned his real full name for the first time. She slipped the paper into her pocket before she left. That same afternoon, she drove to the state prosecutor's office in Ciudad Victoria, 2 hours away. She slid the handwritten note across the desk. and told them exactly who Sama was and where his family lived. The officials stared at her like she had walked in from another planet. They promised to look into it. Miriam did not wait for them to act. She returned home, opened her notebook, and added 3 more nicknames she had overheard during the ransom negotiations. She studied old Facebook posts from people in the same circles. She noted license plates, hangouts, and family connections. Within days, she had another target in her sights. She repeated the disguise trick twice more that month, each time refining her story and her walk. Each time, she came away with another real name and another address. Her notebook grew thicker. Her red hair became her trademark on the back roads of Tamaulipas. But the more names she collected, the more she realized this was no longer a personal hunt confined to San Fernando. The cartel's reach stretched across entire states, and some of the men on her list had already moved on to Reynosa and beyond. She would have to follow them. Within weeks, Miriam packed a small bag and drove north toward Reynosa. She had learned that several names from her notebook had relocated there after the crackdown in San Fernando. She checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts, paid cash, and immediately started the same routine that now felt second nature. She dyed her hair again, this time a softer auburn. She bought a second-hand nurse's uniform and a fake hospital badge she had printed at a copy shop. Every morning, she visited the neighborhoods where her targets' families lived. She posed as a community health worker, offering free checkups. Mothers and sisters opened their doors because she looked harmless and spoke gently. Over coffee and family photos, Miriam collected birthdays, new phone numbers, and recent sightings. She memorized license plates parked outside and noted who drove which car. Back in her motel room each night, she updated the notebook. She cross-referenced everything with public Facebook profiles the cartel members still used under fake accounts. One post showed a man named El Tuerto celebrating a birthday with his cousin. Miriam saved the photo, zoomed in on the background, and recognized the street sign. The next day, she drove past the house. Heart steady, camera ready. By late summer 2014, she had added 9 more names and 3 fresh addresses. She drove the information straight to the federal prosecutor's office in Ciudad Victoria again. This time, the officials did not just stare. They took the folder, asked her how she obtained the details, and promised swift action. Within days, the first 2 arrests happened. Local news reported that authorities had captured low-level Los Zetas members linked to multiple disappearances. Miriam read the headlines in her car and allowed herself one small nod. But the arrests brought new problems. Word spread fast inside the cartel. Someone was feeding names to the government. Miriam noticed the families she had visited growing more cautious. One woman even asked pointed questions about her real job. Miriam smiled, changed the subject, and left quickly. She knew the net was tightening in both directions. Still, she pushed forward. She crossed state lines again, this time to Matamoros, following a lead on a higher-ranking member who had ordered the original ransom call. She rented another room, changed her appearance once more, and started knocking on doors. The closer she got to the men who had actually pulled the triggers, the more she felt eyes on her back. By early 2015, Miriam no longer left the motel without her pistol. She had bought the small 9mm at a pawn shop 2 states away, paid cash, and practiced drawing it from her purse every night until the motion felt natural. She kept the weapon loaded and the safety off. In Matamoros, she dropped the nurse disguise and switched to a plain gray dress and a cheap wig. She started showing up at family gatherings she had only watched from across the street before. One afternoon, she walked straight into a backyard birthday party for a Zeta cousin. She carried a plastic container of homemade tamales and introduced herself as a distant relative from San Fernando. While the men drank beer and laughed, Miriam memorized faces, tattoos, and the exact model of the new truck parked in the driveway. She left before anyone asked too many questions. Back in her room, she wrote every detail in the notebook, then drove 6 hours to hand the fresh pages to the same federal prosecutor. This time, the folder included photographs. The officials finally moved. Within 10 days, 3 more Los Zetas members were arrested in coordinated raids. Court records later showed the charges included kidnapping and murder. Miriam read the news on her phone and felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. But the cartel had started asking questions of its own. Rumors spread through the border towns. There was a woman with changing hair color who asked too many questions. Families who had welcomed her now compared notes. One mother in Reynosa described the visitor's voice. Another remembered the redhead from San Fernando. The descriptions matched. Miriam noticed the shift almost immediately. Doors that once opened now stayed shut. Phones went unanswered. A man she had spoken to weeks earlier suddenly appeared outside her motel, watching her window from the parking lot. She waited until he left, then packed her bag and drove to a different city before sunrise. She changed her appearance again, this time going fully gray and wearing thick glasses. The gun stayed in her purse. By mid-2015, she had helped put away 7 cartel members connected to Karen's disappearance. The authorities praised the anonymous tips in private meetings, but never used her name. Miriam did not care about credit. She only cared about the next name on her list. She had no idea how close the cartel had already come to identifying her. By late 2015, Miriam had helped authorities arrest 10 members of the Los Zetas cell, responsible for Karen's disappearance. Each new folder she delivered to the federal prosecutor's office in Ciudad Victoria contained fresh photographs, addresses, and witness statements she had gathered herself. The raids grew bolder. One operation in Reynosa netted 4 men in a single night. Court records later showed the charges included organized crime and homicide. Miriam never attended the hearings. She stayed in the shadows, changing her appearance every few weeks and moving between safe houses. She began working with a small group of other mothers whose children had vanished. They met in secret, traded leads, and pooled what little money they had for gas and bribes. Her notebook now held over 30 names. In early 2016, the pace quickened. Another 3 Los Zetas members were taken into custody after Miriam provided exact locations of safe houses used for ransom negotiations. Prosecutors told her privately that her information had cracked open cases stalled for years. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the weight lifting. But the cartel had pieced together the pattern. In the spring of 2017, the threats became direct. Anonymous calls reached her home phone. A man's voice warned her to stop. Miriam changed her number the same day and kept hunting. On the morning of May 10th, 2017, she left the house on crutches after re-injuring her foot during a stakeout. It was Mother's Day. She planned to visit Karen's grave later that afternoon. The white pickup truck appeared at exactly 2:17 p.m. The gunshots echoed through the quiet street. Miriam fell in her driveway, the pistol still inside her purse. She was pronounced dead at the scene. In the months that followed, the authorities used the final leads she had left behind. 3 more cartel members were arrested and charged with her murder. The cell that had terrorized San Fernando for years began to fracture under the pressure. Her story spread quietly at first, then louder. Other families took up the same fight she had started alone. Miriam Rodríguez never set out to become a legend. She simply refused to let her daughter's killers walk free. In the end, one mother with a notebook and a changing hair color did what entire police forces could not. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime cases where ordinary people refuse to stay silent. Drop a comment below with the name of the next cartel story or undercover operation you want to hear. We read every single one. See you in the next case.